Makongo is actually a village that is found in Elementaita ward in Gilgil sub-county. And we have really been working together with the farmers to make sure that we are able to mainstream agroecology in the county integrated development plans. We've been working with them from last year, and this year has been very successful because the farmers are able to articulate their needs and be able to work with their local leadership to ensure that agroecology is actually given a space and a chance in the county integrated development plans.
Tukiangalia katika mambo ya county budgets and county plan, kila county iko na budget allocation ambayo yenye yafaa support wakulima, but tumeona serikali kuu, serikali zingine za county focus yao kubwa imekuwa sasa na kusupport mambo ya conventional agriculture. Kwa hivyo kupitia kwa hii advocacy initiative tumekuwa nayo, imekuwa ya kuempower farmers, ya kuweza kuleta stakeholders pamoja. Tumekuwa na washirika kama vile wa Ministry of Agriculture, our local member of county assembly, kuweza kuwaonyesha kwamba wakati ambao wana promote hii kilimo ingine ambayo ni conventional agriculture, bado kuna wakulima katika eneo hili ambao pia wana support mambo ya agroecology.
Online audience, please confirm you can hear us. Fiber? Okay. My name is Christine Gatwiri. I coordinate the Route to Food initiative, which is a comms-based platform that advocates for the right to food through agroecology as a pathway. And I want to welcome you all to this event. We call them the Food Literacy Forums. It's an event, it's a platform that invites different types of stakeholders, farmers, consumers, policymakers, students, farmers, I think I've said farmers again, to have topical discussions around food issues and specifically the right to food. Okay. I don't know, many of us know what the right to food is, but I'm hoping one of our panelists will elaborate, one of our presenters here today from the Right to Food Coalition will elaborate on that. And the topical discussion for today is on global oil conflicts, fertilizers, and food systems. I don't know how many know of what is going on in the world, the oil crisis, and what that has to do with food. But we have many experts today who will explain what that is about. So let me welcome Dr. Harun Waroi to take us through the rest of the program. Thank you.
Hello. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are listening us. Thank you for joining us, and I would like to start by welcoming you all to this forum today, whereby we are meeting at a time when events are unfolding far from our borders, and we are already beginning to see things reshape the conditions under which food is being produced. What is happening in the Gulf today may appear at first glance as an energy or geopolitical issue, but in reality, it is already becoming a food system issue. So, and over the past days, global institutions have been able to put this quite clear. We have, for example, FAO, which has warned that if disruptions around the key trade routes, such as the Strait of Hormuz, persist, fertilizer prices could significantly rise by as much as 15–20% in the coming months. Market signals are already pointing in that direction, with fertilizer prices beginning to rise. This matters because fertilizer is not just another input, it is at the center of how modern agriculture is organized. And more importantly, it is directly tied to energy systems. Nitrogen fertilizers such as ammonia and urea are produced from natural gas. We all know that. So when energy markets are disturbed or disrupted, fertilizer supply is affected almost immediately. And when fertilizer supply is affected, agriculture and eventually food systems become impacted. There's another important dimension to this, and more importantly, is that the global fertilizer trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So what we are seeing is not just a price issue, it's a system that is physically exposed to geopolitical disruptions. And this is already triggered responses elsewhere. Just this week, countries like India have increased fertilizer subsidies to shield farmers from rising global prices. That tells us something very important. This is not just a future risk, it is already happening. So it's something that we have to all appreciate, that we are in a quagmire, that we need to see how we can be able to circumvent it. So before we move in the panel discussion, we wanted to take a setback and injecting oil, fertilizer systems, and food systems. Lisa is the global agrochemicals and fossil fuels campaigner at the Center for International Environmental Law. Her work focuses on how ammonia production is linked to fossil fuel system and industrial agriculture. And the wider implication, this is what the planetary boundaries are heading towards. Prior to this, she worked on EU agriculture and policy and climate policy with the Heinrich Ball Foundation in Brussels, and she held a master's degree in environmental policy and science at ProParis. So Lisa, welcome, and give us the presentation.
food prices will eventually increase via all these steps. But where the linkages are most obvious are these petrochemicals that are literally fossil fuels in another form. And these chemicals, 40% of them are linked to the food system. And a lot of fossil fuel companies are actually betting on increasing the use of plastics, increasing the use of agrochemicals, because other sectors have started to decarbonize, the building sector, the transport sector. So they hope to still increase fossil fuel production because of an increase in demand in these agrochemicals and plastics. So that's why both fossil fuel companies and agrochemical companies have a big interest in actually expanding the industrial food system. But why exactly are fertilizers fossil fuels in another form? Globally, about 3/4 of these nitrogen-based fertilizers are made from fossil gas. So I personally avoid the term natural gas because there's nothing that natural about it. So fossil gas or methane gas are the same thing. And that is mostly relevant, or I should say coal, the remainder, is mostly relevant in China. But in most other countries, nitrogen fertilizers are based on fossil gas. And about 5% is rise. Eventually, food prices will have to rise as well. And this dependency on fertilizers makes the food system extremely vulnerable to price shocks, because fossil fuel markets are inherently prone to this volatility because it's an internationally traded good in a lot of areas that are conflict prone as well. How do you actually make this ammonia? Let's take just a little bit of a closer look so that we are all on the same page. So you take the fossil gas as feedstock, you blast it with steam, so very, very hot water, and that yields or that results in hydrogen and CO2 emissions. So the very chemical process already shows you that there are a lot of CO2 emissions attached or associated with this process. And you need this fossil gas as feedstock to even start the process in the first place. And then, thanks to the famous Haber-Bosch process, the inventors of which got a Nobel Prize for making bread from air, you take nitrogen from the air, combine it with the hydrogen, and then you get ammonia. These things do not happen voluntarily or automatically. You need very, very high pressure and very high temperatures for that to happen. So currently, the world uses a lot of fossil gas, coal and oil to some extent, but fossil fuels, both as feedstock and also as energy in this very, very energy-intensive process. And we have methane emissions that are associated with the use of fossil gas, so upstream emissions. Methane is very climate damaging, even more than CO2. We have the CO2 emissions that are associated with the production process. So fertilizer, fossil fuels in another form, and a highly emitting process. The ammonia making is actually one of the most emissions-intensive commodities. It is twice as emissions-intensive as steel and 4 times as emissions-intensive as cement. And yet, I feel like even within the climate community, not a lot of people talk about this climate footprint of fertilizers. However, I just mentioned we have CO2 emissions with the process, and we have methane emissions with the upstream leakages of fossil gas. However, we actually have a triple whammy for fertilizers because most of the emissions, 60%, actually arise when fertilizers are applied in the form of nitrous oxide emissions. And nitrous oxide is the third most important greenhouse gas and is oftentimes forgotten, but it is almost 300 times as potent as CO2 in warming the climate, and it is also the most ozone-depleting substance. So it's a huge problem for fertilizers, also contributes to air pollution and other things. And taken together, so CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide emissions make the global impact of nitrogen fertilizer production and use just as big as commercial aviation. So that's a huge chunk of climate damaging emissions caused by the overuse of fertilizers. And why is this like fossil fuel, fossil fertilizer link more obvious and more important than ever right now? Well, as I mentioned, food prices, fossil fuels, and fossil fuel-based fertilizers all move in tandem. This is a graph you can see from the late 90s until 25. They really move in parallel. Sometimes you can see even more spikes because that is also sometimes due to profiteering from fertilizer companies. The market is quite an oligopoly, so they have a lot of power to increase prices even beyond the production costs. That's what we saw in the aftermath of the full invasion of Ukraine, for example. But taken together, they all move very much in tandem. And what we're seeing now with what is going on in Iran and the entire region are that prices spike really dramatically. So most of the price spike, or the most significant price spike for now, is for sulfur. That is also in areas that have a lot of fossil fuels, and because of an area where a lot of tension. So it is not only the Strait of Hormuz, which is like a very important trade route, also for non-based fertilizers, but all these countries also happen to be very gas rich. So historically, that's where fertilizer industries have settled and have started their production. So we have lots of production facilities in Iran, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Oman, etc. And what is very worrying is that a lot of countries, here the darker green a country is, the more dependent this country is on imports from that region, fertilizer imports, because the region itself produces a lot of fertilizers, but doesn't necessarily use them in the region, but they really are produced for export. So Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka are very much dependent on these imports. And Kenya, you can also see the color is quite dark. And I think I'm not telling you any new things, but that's where the real problems are now happening. This dependency on gas-rich countries, their production facilities, and very volatile markets. So that is in and on itself a problem. We have the geopolitical dependencies, we have the fossil fuel origin, we have the very climate damaging impact. But besides that, there are other impacts associated with the production and the overuse of fertilizers. We have severe biodiversity loss and negative impacts on soil health. Water pollution is a big issue. So if too much nitrogen fertilizers are applied, the excess nitrogen is, there's a runoff in waterways. We can see dead zones in some oceans and lakes or rivers, like any waterway, basically. We have nitrate pollution in drinking water that is very dangerous, especially for some vulnerable populations, such as pregnant women or babies. You might have heard of the term blue baby syndrome. We have air pollution. Ammonia emissions also contribute very significantly to particulate matter pollution. So that causes respiratory diseases and premature deaths. That is not talked about very often. And there are also other social dimensions, dependency on just a few corporations, etc. So a lot of different impacts. The fossil fuel origin right now is unfortunately not the only problem with fertilizers. And that's why this proposed solution of, well, we will just replace the fossil fuel feedstock with some kind of renewable energy generated fertilizer will actually not solve the problem. While some of the emissions might be mitigated in the production process, they do not mitigate nitrous oxide emissions when fertilizers are applied, and they actually represent 60% of the emissions associated with fertilizer production and use. So even for the climate part, so-called green fertilizers are actually missing the point. And they do not mitigate any of these dimensions that are listed here on this slide, because these are associated with the product itself, and they wouldn't change with a different production process. They would still have the same impacts. It's still a chemical input, etc. And you might have heard of this, like the rainbow of hydrogen, the different colors. There are lots of different colors, but the three most important ones to know, to be able to like take part in all these discussions are gray, blue, and green. So right now we produce almost everything using this method of gray ammonia, so based on fossil gas or coal, or yeah, so that's all the purely fossil-based stuff. Less than 1% is blue, so that is the false promise of being able to capture the CO2 emissions in that hydrogen making process and then bury them somewhere under the ground or under the seabed forever. Highly problematic technology, very expensive and very ineffective, but that's where a lot of investments are going in. And then only 0.01% right now is based on renewable energies, because for now it's been pretty much cost prohibitive. We are lacking the renewable energies. It needs a lot of fresh water. So there are still lots of problems associated with that. And once again, while it does mitigate the production emissions, it does not necessarily address all the other problems associated with fossil fertilizers today. So, and I hope that you will develop further solutions in the next few hours that you're going to have together. But instead of locking in the fossil economy by investing in ever more fertilizer production, also on the African continent, and in expansion of industrial food system, we should rather restore soil health, prioritize organic and biological inputs, and also importantly, especially in countries like mine in France or Germany, feed humans directly rather than growing crops for biofuels or feeding livestock. That's a huge part of the answer. Reduce food waste and food loss. That's also a very big chunk, so that we can actually, whatever we use and produce on our fields ends up in human stomachs, first and foremost. And then really foster this like biological nitrogen fixation. We have all these miraculous plants that can actually do the Haber-Bosch process themselves, basically. They can actually fix nitrogen and provide it to soils, and so that other species can also benefit from it. So these are the questions that you're gonna like discuss now, like how to reduce this import dependency, and is just ramping up domestic production of chemical fertilizers the answer? I would suggest no, at least not a full answer. What really works in practice, what needs to change in policy, and how do you really support this transition at scale? And my last slide is just a little recap of what I would like you to take away from this presentation. So fossil fuels are embedded in every step of the industrial food system, and this starts even before the farm gate with fertilizers and also pesticides. This ties the food system to volatile fossil fuel prices and means dependence on a few powerful producers. That is both true for countries, but also for companies. And now in the ongoing crisis is really a clear and important moment to reconsider this current system and don't just say, okay, we need to reduce import dependency. We actually need to reconsider this entire system, especially when it comes to fertilizers. And green ammonia, therefore, is not a panacea. It might have some role to play in some contexts, but most of the times there are better solutions out there. And healthy soils reduce dependence on inputs in the first place. So thank you very much. And I hope that you're having good discussions now. I wish I could be there in person. My pleasure. And I'm happy to share the slides afterwards for those that are interested.
We sincerely appreciate the way you have been able to contextualize for us in terms of the production of the fossil-based fertilizers, its impact not only to the environment and also to our soils, and how this links to sustainability of agriculture systems. Thanks also for the takeaway points that tie very well to what you have said, the background, based on the actual unsustainability aspect of dependency on the fossil-based fertilizers and the alternatives that we have at hand. And this will be actually very well unpacked during the panel discussion. So colleagues, both online and physical, I would like we hold on any questions that we had for Lisa, and I'm not sure whether Lisa will be there with us to answer those questions, but we will also incorporate them in the overall discussion and for answer in the next panel session. Allow me, colleagues, to transit the next presenter. That is Winnie Ogutu, who is a program officer at the Institute of Social and Accountability, that is TISA, with a strong background in agriculture economics and training in governance and advocacy. Winnie works at the intersection of human rights, food and nutrition, policy, and serves as the coordinator of the Right to Food Coalition in Kenya, both at national and subnational levels. Allow me now to invite Winnie to give us the presentation that will situate the aspects of the right to food. Thank you, Winnie.
Good evening. How are you? Are you okay? Okay, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here and to discuss issues of food, because to me, food is a fundamental human right. It is not just a commodity, it is a means of survival, and it is a form of dignity. We say that it is a fundamental human right because without food, you cannot survive. You can survive without education, but without food, you cannot survive. And you cannot say that you are in good health when there is no food. So we say food is a fundamental human right because when it is not fulfilled, when it is not guaranteed, then all other rights cannot be guaranteed. So I have a small presentation here just to give us And we also empower champions to work on different aspects. So in Vihiga, we have Right to Food champions, and Usawa Champions is a new project in Kiambu that works on gender justice. So that's a snapshot of who TISA is. Thank you. Let's now move to the issue of today. Please scroll. Whoever is, okay. So we are saying that we are here because there's a looming crisis on right to food. And just to let you know that right to food is in our constitution. We have a right to food. I'm not saying right to be fed. It's right to food, meaning the government should create a conducive environment for people to produce their own food. And in situations where people are not able to produce their own food, then they should be given safety nets. That's why we have in Wajami programs like that. So in our constitution, you see it's the right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. With what is happening in Iran, do you think we have the right to be freed from hunger? Given the reports that were given by the Global Hunger Index, we launched it in March, and it was showing that Kenya already is at serious levels of hunger. Our level is already at serious level. And that's why this discussion is serious, because the impact of the global oil crisis, at the moment, the government is telling us we are monitoring. We are assessing the situation. You understand the language of our president. It's giving us hope that we are monitoring the situation. Don't worry, we have enough supply of fertilizer. But do we have it for the next season? And what about the fluctuations in the fuel prices? We may have the fertilizer, but how is it transported? How is the food that has been produced transported? So eventually, the effect on the prices of fuel is going to affect our what? Our food. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a snapshot of what is already happening. So we saw what was happening in 2008 when there was the global oil shocks. Fertilizer rose, and there was a serious problem. Then the situation was stabilized to 2022, where we now saw also the Russian-Ukraine war also coming, and it affected the prices of what? Of fuel. So that tells you how much our dependency on external sources for inputs is very vulnerable. And it means that with just one decision from one political power, then we are on food crisis. And now we are moving to when the situation was just about to stabilize in 2024. And 2025, if you read at the economic reports, 2025 there's a little bit of stability. Then now in 2026, in the first quarter, we are hit with what? Iran and Israel US war. Now those people are in their, in fact, they are in their play field. To them, it's about big boys playing. But it's about the power dynamics. Who wants what, where, and when, and how? Who controls what? Who controls the resources? So Iran is there trying to protect their influence. But now they're saying the best way to retaliate this is to interfere with the what? With the, we call it, what's that water canal? Strait of Hormuz. So already, we are in the first quarter of the year, and the price, the fertilizer prices has already gone closer to what was happening in 2008. I'm wondering what will happen at the end of the year. Only God knows. Let's go. There's a problem likely with the, okay. So this is already what we've got from the previous presenter, and I just placed it here just to, somebody may be seated here and wondering where is the Strait of Hormuz. So that is where the conflict is all about. It's all about the Gulf regions and the Iran, and of course the Strait of Hormuz is a waterway, and that you see it's at the corner. And why is it important? Why is this point of the world very important? And even God is asking why he created, because now it is the point of conflict, and now people are are almost going hungry. Now I was so interested, and you see, it's one of the, a third of the global trade of fertilizer passes there. A third of the global trade passes there. And 20% of shipments of natural gas for fertilizer passes through that waterway. So already the conflict that's around that waterway, UN is already warning countries that if this goes on like this, then 45 million people are likely to be pushed to acute hunger by mid-2026. And I was left wondering, are we ready for another push of hunger? Considering what we saw in the northeastern, we are not ready as Kenyans. And that's why this conversation today must give us solutions as to what we should be doing. Right, I don't know what is happening. I'll use my own copy. Okay, this is technology. This is technology. So I was looking at the countries that import fertilizers from Gulf, because that is where the problem is. And I was so shocked that Kenya is among the top 10 countries. This is data from, it's at the screen. I got this data from, let me get it. It's called Guardian Reporters. It's a Guardian report. It's called Guardian, the report on the
Makongo is actually
around the world.
That is found in Elementaita ward in Gilgil sub-county. And we have really been working together with the farmers to make sure that we are able to mainstream agroecology
among the top 10
in the county
countries importing fertilizer from Gulf, then what is the situation that we have? Even if we are being sold, no, don't worry, we are monitoring. The data already shows that if nothing is done, then we are in a bad state. So Kenya is importing 26% of its fertilizer from Gulf regions, those countries. And I just mentioned India here as one of the countries also in Asian countries that is also importing 60% of gas. And I was so interested in India because where do our rice come from? Where do our rice come from? The percentage, we import rice majorly from India. And how many people don't eat rice here? Not eating, don't. Everybody in this room eats what? Now, imagine if rice prices are affected, it means there will be a pinch in your pocket, right? So I was so much interested, and if you look at the world news of what is going on in India, the migrants who are working in the cities are already crying that they want to go back to their villages because of the prices of gas. In the cities, you are not allowed to use alternative means like what? Firewood. Do you use firewood here in the flats in Nairobi? Do you use them? No. So just like in India, they are not allowed to use. So if you don't have gas, then you don't have any means of cooking. And when you can't cook, can you work? You cannot work. So many Indians, the migrant workers who are working in different factories because of this impact, they are going back to the villages. Now, when people are going back, meaning they cannot work in those factories, and maybe one of them is your favorite rice factory. Let's move. Okay, so why does it matter? Why is this conversation very important to Kenya? Now, Kenya is a net importer of food products. A net importer means you import more than you export. You getting it right? You import more than you export. So it means we are depending on other countries for rice, for wheat, it's written weird, for edible oils, for sugar. We are even depending on Uganda. We are depending on Uganda for what? Who knows? What? What? Milk. Part of the milk comes from Uganda. Eggs. And what about Tanzania? Onions. So Kenya is a net importer. So by ourselves, we cannot produce all the quantities of food that we need. We have to import. So that's already a red sign, because if because this is a global thing, so if all the other countries are affected by the fertilizer prices, it means that even their food prices will go up. So the food products we are importing in the country will automatically be of higher price. And I was just looking at the statistics of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics of 2026. They were giving us a consumer price index of February. So they were comparing the consumer price index of February last year versus this year. And already it is at 44.3%. It means that the prices that you used to buy items last year compared to this year is already higher by 4.3%. And I was looking at what are really the contributors, and part of them was gas. Part of them was gas and fuel. Now, given the effect of the what? Of the global oil shocks, where are we as Kenyans? Let's continue. So, why am I talking about right to food as now a looming crisis? Right to food has 4 pillars, and one of them is food availability. For the right to food to be fully realized, all the 4 pillars must be stable. Must be what? Must be stable. So we're talking about food availability. How available is the food? How is the production? The moment fertilizer prices rises, then it means that already food availability does what? Will go down, because at some point the farmers will lose hope in the fertilizer, because it's increasing the cost of production. So production will decline. And again, the fertilizer itself may not be enough. So it means that if a farmer was planning to plant maybe 10 acres and is not able to get enough quantity of fertilizer, then he may reduce the acreage to around 8 acres. Now, let's go into the food accessibility. Accessibility is how you can able to access that food economically. You know, there might be food, but you cannot access it because of the price. So there are people sleeping hungry in Nairobi, and there are markets closer to them. They cannot get that food because it's not accessible to them economically wise. And remember that part of the issues that affects food production may also affect accessibility, in that, as a farmer, there are farmers who rely primarily to get their income from farm production. And we can now transition talking about food systems, because when we talk about food systems, they're now talking about the whole system of food production. I may not be a farmer, but I'm a trader relying on food products to sell to consumers. So I'm already in that food, I'm in that food systems. The moment I'm not able to get enough stock from the farmers, or the farmers give me at a higher price because the cost of production was higher, then I'm not able to even get enough profit. So economically, I'm also affected. So when you think about the impact of fertilizer prices in the whole food systems, then you understand that several people are affected along the way. Job issues, there are job losses along the way. So let's talk about adequacy, and that's another pillar of right to food. So adequacy, we are talking about, when I talk about adequacy here now, I have an expert. I have my Right to Food Coalition members here, and Crispus is here. We talk so much about food safety. And adequacy is about the nutritious and safe food. It may reach a point that when you're not able to access food, you may have to eat maybe one food daily and daily. So you're not able to diversify your what? You're not able to diversify your food that is on nutritious. At the same time, you are not able to get safe food, the mode of production, kind of. And the issue of the sustainability and stability, now, this is how the whole system, how stable is all these things? And when we talk about global, these global oil shocks and fertilizer challenges, then you realize that it destabilizes the whole food systems. And what happens is that the people who are most affected, the people who are most vulnerable, and the smallholder farmers, tell me, what is the percentage of the rural population that depends on agriculture? statistics have it that is 80%. 80% of people in the rural areas derives their livelihoods from agriculture. So then you understand why agricultural sector, agri-food systems, is a very big component in the economy. The moment we have the pillars of the food security, of the right to food are destabilized, then we have the issues of inequality also now increasing in the country. Now the poor become poorer. The richer become richer. Now tell me why there was an importation of what happened? Do you know what happened in the importation of the fuel at the coast? What happened? Okay. What happened is that there was entry of unsafe fuel in the country. So it means that to some people this was a challenge to make what? To make money. Okay. I'm almost done. I think the last slide. Okay. Let's go to the last slide, on to the solutions. And as the slide comes, the first solution is that there must be a policy shift. How many are aware in the country that we had the launch of agroecology policy? Agroecology strategy. We have an agroecology strategy, but what is lacking is the political will and the resources to implement agroecology strategy. But why is it that we have a national fertilizer subsidy program? Why do we have it? Could there just be a very intentional effort by the government to also put money in agroecology-based production of food? Why can't we strengthen even the production of biofertilizers? Why must we continue importing and putting billions of money into the synthetic fertilizer? So there must be a policy shift to transition the country from production using synthetic fertilizer to changing the systems fully. Another thing is strengthening agricultural financing. Until now, we have launched CADAP 2026-2035. One of the things there is that agricultural sector should be given 10% of our what? Of our national revenue. But what is ailing Kenya is that 70% of that of our revenue is for paying what? For paying debt. So all the allocation of agricultural sector has always remained at 3%. At 3%, but majority of that percentage is used for recurrent what? Expenditure. So then, what is happening right now is that there's insufficient even extension services at the county levels. What should happen again is the market shift. I've already mentioned that. Intentional production of the biofertilizer and institutional shifts. In that, there should be a strengthening of extension services and agroecology training. When you go to the county levels, and to the county levels, you realize that the trainings that are happening there are not majorly for the agroecologists, but the private sectors. So you'll find FAO pushing for agroecology. But we should have an intentional effort by the government to make sure that farmers at the grassroots are trained on agroecology, and they also have soil health advisory. Finally, strengthen our accountability and transparency in the country. Strengthen public participation. It is a time that people should be asked, do you still need the National Fertilizer Program? Or do you think that we should have an alternative ways of production? When you go to the rural areas, some of the farmers are not even using the fertilizer. They tell you, I'm using compost, I'm using biofertilizer. Can we also have public participation on issues of food systems and strengthen the public in budget tracking? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Winnie and Lisa, for setting the context so clearly. We were to have a session of question and answers, but we are having some challenges of time with the two panelists, so we will straight away go to the panel session, whereby we want to take the conversation into a point whereby we are able to connect what we have had about science, systems, and practical experiences from the panelists. And we have got 3 panelists online. I wish we can have them on board, Fiber. And then we have one who is physically here. And very quickly is that we are going to have Professor Nancy Mungai. Professor Mungai is a professor of soil science at Egerton University with deep expertise in soil biology, nutrient cycling, and sustainable soil fertility management. Her work focuses on biological nitrogen fixation and the role of soil-based approaches in building resilient and productive farming systems. Secondly, we have Dr. Kevin Okoth. Dr. Okoth is an agriculture economist and policy analyst with extensive experience in sustainable food systems, climate change, and inclusive development across Africa. He specializes in evidence policy analysis and has contributed to numerous research publications and policy processes. He is currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the African Center for Technology Studies, that is ACTS, where he co-leads work in science, technology, and innovation policy. We'll also be joined by Mr. Jigar Chokshi. Mr. Jigar is an entrepreneur working in biological soil inputs in Kenya with over a decade of hands-on experience in research and product development. He has worked closely with farmers across country, focusing on practical application on mycorrhiza and soil-based solutions. Then last but not least, we are going to have Madam Mary Wehenya, who is here with us, who is a multidisciplinary practitioner with strong foundation in communication and law, and combined with hands-on experience in sustainable agriculture. She is actively engaged in developing and managing agroecological farming system with focus on soil health, biodiversity, and low input approaches that support resilient and sustainable farming systems. Having said that, colleagues, is that we will straight away go to, we'll straight away go to our panel. I know time is not with us. And Fiber, I hope we have all our panelists on stage. I was to start with Professor Nancy, then go to Dr. Kevin, but Mr. Jigar has requested that we bring him on board. Is Jigar in? He's in. Okay, thank you so much. This will break the order of the flow of thoughts, but Jigar, you have heard about the dependency of fertilizer and how unsustainable it is in terms of food production because of the changes that are happening globally. So I know you have been working with biological inputs like mycorrhiza. In simple terms, how do these help farmers reduce reliance on synthetic fertilizer? Welcome, Mr. Jigar. Yes, you can come in. Come in, Jigar, yes. Did you get my question?
Yes, sir.
Did you get my question?
First of all, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Jigar.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity given. And sorry to the other panelists. So, Mr. Dr. Harun has broken the chain. Sorry for that, because I'm traveling to Baringo and there will be no network basically. So I requested me to be joined number one. Now, sir, in particular your question on mycorrhiza. First of all, I was within the session for Elisa and Tisa both, and I just wanted to mention one line that is a farmer involved in whatever circumstances happening in this world, a smallest farmer I'm talking of. A smallest farmer, say for an example in Baringo, is not, he is not interested in what is happening. He is only interested in what will I eat tonight or tomorrow. Can you hear me, sir? Am I clear? All right. All right. So basically, I'm talk I'm talking for yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
I can.
Good, 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 good. So when you finish respond, you can tell me. But what we wanted actually to capture is the issue of, in very simple terms, you help us to understand how we can reduce dependency on synthetic fertilizers using inputs like microhyza.
Correct, sir. One thing, basically all our soils, say for an example, when a farmer is using any PPK synthetic fertilizer, hardly very little percentage of its application is being utilized by the crop. Majority of them are still retained inside the soil. So whatever is been retained inside the soil, as days pass, it gets dormant. Yeah. So a very little percentage of the synthetic or compound fertilizers is being utilized by the crop. So when you apply mycorrhizer, it will mobilize all those dormant nutrients, including water from the soil, and give it to the roots. As a result, the dependency for the synthetic fertilizer will be reduced automatically, and a farmer will get better production with better grades and better pricing and better volumes. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank
sir.
you, thank you. That's a very good response you have given. I want to ask you to build on what you've said, and from your experience, what works well in practice? Where do farmers struggle when adopting these approaches? Because we are realizing that farmers keep on depending on fertilizers as the only solution out of which they can enhance their fertility of the soils or provide nutrients for their crops. So where is the missing link?
Sir, basically what happens is it's a mindset for a farmer. I'll ask you a question, and that like our grandfathers, were they using any chemicals? The answer will be no. They were not using any chemicals, and still they were getting better crops. The reason is the soils were still virgin. It is us who is responsible to poison our soils, and that is the reason we have depleted our soils. We have depleted our crops, we have depleted our production. We are not able to get those production what we desire for. And to get the production better, we need to improve our soils. Now, how to improve our soils is to enhance or mobilize those nutrients which are already locked inside the soil. So we have to change the mindset for a farmer, and to change a mindset for a farmer, he needs such vocals or such, the stage what you have said today. Many stages should come forward and explain to the farmer, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Igar. And I believe that what we are hearing now is a mind of change and appreciating that there are some bio inputs that we can go for, which can be able to enhance our soil biology as they are able to unlock the available nutrients in our soils like phosphorus. And microhyza is a strong input that farmers can go for. Thank you so much. We are going to release you, Jigar. I know you are heading to Baringo and you are going there to do what you are advocating here to promote the adoption of Jigar and also outscaling it. We are not just talking about adoption, but the scaling effect on use of bio inputs. Thank you so much, Jigar. All right, you have heard us, Jigar. Can we release you? Thank you. Colleagues, we are going to proceed now with the other members of the panel. And Professor Nancy, welcome to this panel. And let me go back to where we were to start from the soil itself. Knowing that soil is a foundation for agriculture, and ask you, Professor Nancy Mungai, what is happening to our soils under the long-term reliance on fertilizer, the synthetic fertilizer? Prof, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roy. I want to also appreciate the panelists who's just spoken before me. as we continue to use inorganic fertilizers, that the pH, depending on which fertilizer that is being used and the amount of fertilizer that is being used, the pH also changes. And we have had empirical evidence of a decline in pH. We also know that for soils that heavily rely on inorganic fertilizer, that the microbial biomass decreases over time. And ultimately, those soils may not be as productive as they should be. That is the way we present soils, and particularly for the highland soils. I think it's good to put everything into context. That when we're talking about use of synthetic fertilizers, is that the largest quantity of fertilizer is used within the highland. Many of us will know the areas that were previously called the White Highlands, which makes about 60% of the total land mass. So it's good to put that context that this is the kind of thing that you will expect in these intensive systems where there's high use of fertilizer. But I also qualify it before I hand it back to you that we also know that the fertilizer use is quite variable across our farmers. There are farmers who are using high quantities of fertilizer, but there are also the larger percentage of farmers who are using suboptimal amounts of fertilizer. And so when we think about the effect of fertilizers, we also must remember that there are those variations, that there are those who are using recommended rates, but a big fertilizer. Back to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Prof. Now, I want us to contextualize and to contextualize this narrative and look at some studies that have already shown the impact of fertilizer on our soil biology, vis-a-vis what Mr. Jigar has been able to show that we can still use some biological initiatives or bio-inputs that are going to enhance the biology of the soil, that also improves the unlocking of the available nutrients in the soil, nourishing these soils. So what does it mean for the long-term productivity and sustainability of our farms if we still take on this path of depending on these synthetic inputs in terms of fertilizer that we are not assured in terms of availability and consistent available within the season or within the years that are to come? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is true, I really enjoyed the presentations that were done before. I mean, they were quite informative. Really thank Lisa and Winnie. And Jigar also for bringing the fact that we know that the fertilizer that is applied, only a small percentage of that fertilizer is actually taken up by the plant. So we bring in the issue of nutrient use efficiency. So only a small percentage is utilized. So some of the fertilizer may be lost through leaching or other processes of volatilization. Some of it may also be lost through erosion. So we do know that only a small percentage will be lost. So the long term, if we are to build long-term sustainability, then there is need for proper utilization of the fertilizer that is being used, number one, in that many times when the fertilizer is applied, we need to make sure that it is properly placed, it is applied at the right time, it is applied at the right amount, and the right type for that particular crop. So that would be one way that we need to ensure that for longer term sustainability, then we are able to use fertilizer in the right way that is supposed to be used. It, of course, minimizes the environmental impact that fertilizer would have. And I like the fact that Lisa also talked about the carbon footprint of production of fertilizers. So that is at the global level, we must also be cognizant of the fact that we have that global impact, or that global carbon footprint of producing fertilizers. But then studies have also shown that we can enhance the nutrient use efficiency using integrated soil fertility management. This is where you're able to use fertilizers, but combined with organic sources, so that we are able to enhance the nutrient use efficiency. And that has, over and over again, it has been shown that integrated use of organic and inorganic fertilizer results in higher yields. It also results in higher nutrient use efficiency. Introduction of organics actually improves the sustainability of that kind of a system. Because again, studies have shown that when you use inorganic fertilizers only over a prolonged time, there is still a decline. And especially in our setting where we use inorganic fertilizers and we don't return back the residues that come from the farm, then the studies have shown a systematic decline in organic carbon. So introducing inorganic sources certainly enhances
Recording in progress.
the sustainability of the system, and it also helps with the longer term use of that kind of a land, and it helps that system to be much more resilient. Thank you.
Prof, and we really appreciate the kind of information we are getting and the direction that this is taking to us, whereby if we continue on this path, we're asking ourselves that science is telling us that our soils are weakening. The question then becomes, why are we so dependent on this model in the first place, whereby we are depending on synthetic fertilizer? The narrative from the extension is only on the synthetic fertilizers, but we are so glad that the narrative is changing. We know there's a policy that CalRO and the Ministry of Agriculture and other partners within the fertilizer value chains are working on to come up with a policy on how we can integrate both inorganic and organic fertilizers. We're also happy about the agroecology policy approach that is being taken both at the national and the county level governments to be able to integrate both sustainable practices like agroecology and organic inputs to be used where we can be. But of course, we need to appreciate that if it is the path that needs to be taken, it has to be gradual. We are not saying that we can withdraw overnight on synthetic inputs when it comes to fertilizers. This can be done gradually, but with a mind of having a sustainable approach over the time. This takes me to Dr. Kevin Euko. Karibu, Daktari. And Kevin, from a systems perspective, what has our food system become so dependent on these synthetic fertilizers? Karibu, Daktari.
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, I want to appreciate the opportunity to invite me to be part of this panel discussion. Also want to appreciate my colleagues who have just presented, Lisa, trying to showcase whatever is already happening globally, but also really trying to tell us about right to food and how this links with the current global crisis, and also Jiga and Professor Nancy. Just to answer your question, I would want to say that our food system is, as we've seen, our food system is externally dependent. It means that the core productivity functions, like soil fertility management, we have to outsource this from the international market. And just as Winnie mentioned, to understand, maybe just to break down what a food system is. The global food system includes all the activities from pre-production, that is input, to production, to processing, to distribution, and then to consumption. So when we see at the pre-production, at the input level, be it fertilizer, be it the seeds being outsourced from the international market, then we can say that there is a structural dependency in that when the cost and availability of fertilizer locally, maybe in Kenya and even across sub-Saharan Africa, being data by more than events like what is happening in the Eastern Europe, the Gulf energy routes, and even the global gas prices, then this means that there's a structural dependency issue within our food systems. The second aspect is that I also want to bring is that our system rewards short-term yields over long-term soil health. And just as Prof has mentioned, we need to relook at our model. The current food system, we look at, can we be able to get immediate yield in terms of maximizing the productivity over looking at long-term soil regeneration. So for years, productivity strategies are focused on increasing application rates of synthetic fertilizers. But then we are underinvesting in soil organic matter, biological activity, and soil structure. But I'm happy that just what you mentioned, I think Winnie did mention that there's already a national agroecology strategy that was launched, I think running from 2024 to 2034, that is focusing on trying to transition towards sustainable and climate resilient inclusive food systems by focusing on trying to restore our soil health. And again, recently, I think in May 2024, there was a declaration at continental level. There was the Nairobi Fertilizer and Soil Health Declaration, the African Union also trying to aim to restore the soil health, about 30% of the degraded land, and also ensuring that about over 70% of the smallholder farmers can be able to improve their soil productivity. But also another key issue other than those two is also to mention that we've been also reliant on subsidies. I think Winnie did also mention about subsidies. We've seen subsidies, the national subsidies coming in, the government trying to support or cushion smallholder farmers, but these are short term. And this normally conceal the systemic weaknesses. So the issue is not even the fertilizer prices alone, it is about the production model whereby we are dependent on continuous flow of subsidized external inputs. So the key issue is that can we be able to restructure this? Already we are seeing that there is a systemic weakness in terms of dependency. Thank you. I don't know if, thank you. Back to you, Aaron.
Kevin, and I think you have brought a very nice kind of direction in our thoughts, whereby we are seeing that the way the system is structured, it is more on input, external input dependent, rather than more of within a regenerative approach, whereby we need to have a cyclic way of looking at the production system. Now, allow me to come in this question whereby, knowing that we have got these recent global shocks, which have been well articulated by Lisa and Winnie in their past presentations, and now coming from Ukraine to Gulf, tell us about the risk of this kind of dependency on the fertilizer, knowing that this fertilizer, and we have already been shown by Winnie, we are number 10 globally on fertilizer import. What do you think are the risks associated with this kind of dependency?
Thanks, Aaron. Maybe what I want to mention is that, of course, we understand that there have been global shocks, not just the current ongoing war, that is the Gulf Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz disruption, where we've seen current tension in Gulf, disruption around major shipping routes. I think that was already showcased the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, trying to reinforce this particular vulnerability. We understand that fertilizer and the feedstock moves through these particular strategic corridors, and the conflict in these regions directly affect the availability, the freight cost, and even the delivery timelines for this. And so with the current evidence, we show that there is a major disruption to global seaborne fertilizer trade. And so what this shows is that the global wars that we are seeing reveal that our food system is geopolitically exposed. And not just the current war that is ongoing. We've previously seen the Ukraine-Russia war, where we saw that the war demonstrated how quickly geopolitical conflict can translate into fertilizer insecurity. We understand that Russia is a major global supplier of nitrogen, phosphate, and even potash fertilizer. So around this time, when there was that particular war, we understand there was also disruption in the natural gas market, which is also very important in ammonia and urea production. And so this caused the price spikes globally. So just in a nutshell, this was already disrupting our production, and so we need to rethink how we can be able to move away from over reliance on the international market, but also trying to see how can we be able to have a clear transition pathway by promoting probably agroecology as a clear transition pathway. Yes, Arun.
Response you have given to us, and now this takes us to our colleague, Madam Mary Waihenya, who is a real agroecology practitioner, and she does it in scale in Nanyuki, and also a key advisor and an advocate of agroecology. Mary, like I've said, you are practicing agroecology at scale. From a cost to risk perspective, how does your system compare to conventional fertilizer-based farming? Please.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am so privileged to be here. My colleague talked about 80% of farmers. I am one, proudly so. I'm so happy to Heinrich for always including a farmer. You need us in these conversations. Every day I am balancing costs, I'm balancing real risks, and I'm looking for the yield. On a personal level, I love food. So I will be part of that in conversation, whether it is growing it, eating it, selling it, the entire spectrum. So I'm quite at home over here. Usually I'm theorizing. Today I'm just going to speak practice. When we talk costs, I thought the best way to make this comparison is to look at where is the ordinary conventional farmer spending their money every season. And I summarized it in 4 key areas. One, it's in land preparation. A conventional farmer is tilling that land every season. That is fuel, that is labor, that's machinery. The second place they're spending money is in their view of fertility, which is buying a bag of fertilizer or 2, basil, and then later top dress. They have to spend that money. You're not farming without buying that input. The third place is maintaining the crop. So every farmer these days is going to buy a herbicide because weeding is a nightmare for them. And then everybody kind of has a lab of about 20 to 30 pesticides or fungicides to treat diseases. They are spending that on a weekly basis. They've made them as small as 50 ml to as large as 20-liter jerry cans. This is expensive. This cost has to be incurred and continues to go up. Another cost is water. Because the soil, as my colleagues have said, is not holding any carbon, you are using a lot of water. Contrast that to my farm. I tilled once, only at the very beginning. I have never tilled again. We use a model called permanent raised beds, and so we never till the soil. We maintain our soil biology, and I'll speak about how that improves our costs over time. The second way is we look at fertility completely differently. I'm creating my fertility season upon season. I always have running compost piles. I always have drums where I'm fermenting something. I'm always having eggshells I'm keeping in a corner to turn into calcium. I'm growing microbes at one corner of the farm. Mycorrhiza is my friend. I'm looking into my piles for it and looking to add it into my soil. Fertility for us is not an input. It's something we create and continue to add. In terms of maintaining the crop, because we don't turn the soil, weeds are only a big deal for us in the beginning. And we don't look at them as a nightmare. We look at them as the green that we put in the compost pile. So they don't annoy us. We happily weed. In the future, we know that we're going to weed with every passing season less and less. We're not turning the soil, so we don't have new weeds coming up. We're using mulch. We're growing with tighter spacing, very dense type of spacing. So we're not really dealing with weeds. They're not a problem for us. So they're not a cost that we continue to incur season over season. We never need to look into a herbicide. As for pest diseases, our approach is completely different. When you're growing food agroecologically, your crops are resilient. We are hardly ever dealing with disease. And even so, we use garlic chili on a need-be basis. So it's not a core cost in our farming practice. So over time, you find that you're spending less and less and can pretty much go a whole month without ever spraying your crop, even the biological inputs. As for water, I mentioned that we don't turn the soil, we are adding carbon, we are growing with mulch, so we use very little water. And that makes us not spend, we're not fueling our machines or using electricity to pump water. At most, in a dry season, we'll need to irrigate twice a week, sometimes once, and it gets better and better. These are the things the farmers are using money on a season-to-season basis. When you contrast it to the agroecological farmer, we do have this cost in the beginning, but as we continue to farm, they get less and less. We are not having to reset and repurchase on a season-to-season basis, and that creates a very big contrast, Harun, as to and I wanted to say also, for the agroecological farmer, 3 years in, I'm happy, I'm having return. For the conventional farmer, most of them are calling me to help them 4 to 5 years in, because the soil can only take so much toxicity. They are overrun with disease, overrun with pests. So the real cost, every cost I've mentioned only becomes more and more. They've tried every dawa in the spectrum. They've tried everything and it's not working. So what is the real cost of having to abandon land that you've already created infrastructure for? Because it won't take, it's not gonna grow your crops anymore. So that's a real contrast.
Thanks, Mary. Now you can see why we positioned Mary towards the end. She's just a real preacher of regenerative agriculture from an agroecological perspective. Thank you so much, Mary. But I have this question, Mary. From your experience, can Kenya realistically reduce the dependency on fertilizer and move to that direction that you have well explained? And what will this take?
Obviously, yes. I'm farming at scale with no synthetic fertilizer, so we can do it. But Harun, it requires such a system change. A lot of the conversation today has been addressing feeding the plant, not feeding the soil. And that makes a very big difference.
Can you expound on that, please? I like that. That's a very good statement you have given.
If a regular farmer goes to an agrovet and says, I want to grow maize, they will ask, how much maize do I need per acre? X amount. What do I need to plant this maize? 2 bags of DAP at the beginning, and then 1 bag of something in the middle, and another bag of something in the end. It's a formula that is based on maize. If it's beans, it's slightly different. If it's carrots, it's slightly different. You get what I mean? It's a formula. Agroecologically, we don't have a formula. We build our soil, so then our soil can grow whatever we require it to grow. Yeah. So that's a big contrast there. So one is we need to fill this knowledge gap. We need to have more forums like this. We need to have the government funding people who are willing to demonstrate these farms, like myself. We need to fund agricultural extension officers. We need to work with the farmers because they are not farming with synthetic fertilizer because they want to. It is because they know nothing else. So we need to bridge that knowledge gap. We need to change the way we look at fertility. It is not an input. It's something we create. I mean, we need to look at pesticides as something that exists in nature. When we farm with biodiversity in mind, it does half the work for us. And even biodiversity offers the solution. Last week, we needed, my guys were asking me, oh, what can we put on the crops? And we didn't have, we are not in harvest for garlic and chili, and I like not to buy anything. So I looked at a neighbor's fence, and his Lantana Camara was thriving. And we just went, hi, could I cut some of your Lantana Camara? He's like, for what? I'm like, oh, I'm making a pesticide. He's like, sure. That's the current pesticide on my farm this week. All it took is 2 or 3 days of ferment. The reality of farming a different way exists, but the knowledge is what we haven't made widespread. Another way we can do this is stop the tillage. Even if you use fertilizer, you will use far less if you don't keep tilling the soil. You hold on to carbon. And when you hold on to carbon, then you are holding on to fertility. That's a quick change you can make. On large-scale farms, we need to put bioteams. This is what I'm doing in the large-scale farms I'm at. Finding teams that create the fertility on the farm. Our farms create a massive amount of waste. You would be in shock how many tons you get when you terminate a crop. That termination, within a month, can provide you all the fertility you need for the next 2 to 3 seasons. But you know what we do? We put it in a pile and we burn it up because it's an eyesore. So we need to create the ability to create our own fertility. Now, is this possible? Yes, it does need a lot of support.
Thank you very much. Because of time, that will bring us to the end of our panel discussion in terms of question answers that we have held. And really appreciate the kind of knowledge in terms of the perspectives that have been laid from the aspects of the soil itself, soil biology, soil fertility, what soil health entails in terms of the structure, the biology, and the nutrients of the soil. And then the scaling approach from a policy perspective that Kevin has able to articulate to us very well. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Jagir in absentia. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks, Mary, for that. I would like to open the floor to our participants here physically and also those who are online. So, Fiber, please. Keep us informed if you get questions online that you would like to interact with. And would you want us to give the honor to the online team before we come back to people in the house? How do you do it? We start here. Good. Any question in house?
There's a question here. We can start with her. Any other person with a question?
Sure. Hello. My name is Miriam Chilangat from KU School of Law. I have a question on matters of especially seeds. As much as we know, most of the seeds are bought from government, and recently I think they uplifted the ban on GMO on seeds especially. And I think that affects badly a lot of stuff. Because from what we know, if we are relying on seed produced by a certain company, it has a certain method in which that seed would go, you'd buy it, and then it would have an effect, and then you're told, buy a pesticide like this. And so it's just more of a cycle. If you buy that seed, it goes on, you buy the pesticide, you buy the certain fertilizer, you go on, you go on. I think, in my own opinion, how much can we prompt the government and prompt farmers, especially, to produce seed that are naturally ours? Like, you see, as we go on, as we are evolving every day, seeds that were naturally used a long time ago are now being eradicated, and we are replacing them with seeds brought from companies we do not know. So how much can we do as maybe as you as partners, as NGOs, who go out and educate people? And also as the government, how can it support farmers to naturally depend on the seeds they grow instead of buying them over and over again?
Thank you. Let's take one more.
Good afternoon. My name is Tess, and I have a question. I think Dr. Kevin said that the reason why there's reliance to synthetic fertilizers is because our system rewards short-term yields instead of the long-term benefits. So my question is to Marie. Are they used the same quantity and quality while you're using the organic, while going organic? That's my question. And if yes, why isn't that implemented already? Because the damage has already been done. Thank you.
Any other question, or can we go to the online audience? Okay.
Thank you. Mine is more of a concern with regard to the promotion of agroecology. We know very well that there's a lot of information that exists in terms of research. But how is this information reaching the farmer? How can we bridge that gap? Because even the counties that are coming up with agroecological policies, how are they addressing the issue of extension? Because as much as agriculture was default to the counties, they are not employing enough extension officers. So how are we going to ensure that this information that we are talking about can reach as many farmers as possible? Thank you. Oh, I didn't say my name. My name is Edwin Odeng. I'm a member of Root to Food. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take the last one from Crispus.
Thank you so much. My name is Crispus Kenywa. And so my question is, or rather it's also a concern. In 2024, we had the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit in Kenya. And one of the overarching themes was how African countries are not taking up enough fertilizers. And there was that push for countries to keep taking up more, buying more, and using more fertilizers. How do we bridge this disconnect? Is it that these top guys, the policymakers, do not understand, or they are under pressure to keep buying fertilizers from those big companies, those big countries? And how do we then address that issue? Because clearly our soils are getting worse. We are not recycling enough. Today as I was coming, I passed by a market and I saw a lot of food waste, the fiber and all those things that that remain after the food has come to Nairobi. These things don't go back to the soils where the food came from. So we are not recycling. We are still pumping our soils with more fertilizers. And at the AU level, they are telling countries to keep buying more fertilizers. So how do we break ourselves free from this hold? For me, I feel it's a hold that African countries are held very tightly by these big countries. How do we then protect our farmers? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, last one.
My name is Selvon Shchenga, and my question is, now that we already know that that Kenya, we as Kenya, we highly depend on imported fertilizer, and we are vulnerable to these global shocks. Why is it that the system has maintained focusing on subsidies inputs instead of transforming the system or redefining the system to focus on local fertilizer, rather agroecology inputs?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, colleagues. We are going to start with the first question. Please, can you, Anne from Biba, I would like to request you to respond to the first question on how much can we make farmers produce seeds or even support farmers to depend on the seeds that they produce from our sister, from the Kenya School of Law.
Thank you very much. My name is Anne Maina from the Biodiversity and Biosafety Association of Kenya. The issue you mentioned, there was also an issue mentioned about genetically engineered crops. Kenya lifted the ban on the importation of GMOs in 2024. As an organization, Biba Kenya, we went to court with others. We lost the case in 2025, but have gone back to court at the Court of Appeal. One of our issues that we are raising is that on what basis did the cabinet make that decision? Because in a previous case we had taken in 2015 to court, the judgment ruled that before such a decision is made, there has to be public education, awareness, and education, and public awareness, education, and participation. So that's an ongoing case. On the issue of seed, the provisions that were in our Seed and Plant Varieties Act were very harsh on the smallholder farmer. They were not considered some people who can breed or we can even exchange their seeds. And we went to court also as Biba Kenya and others. Last year was a big win for us in November 27th, 2025, where in this case, which was seeking a constitutional interpretation of our Seed and Plant Varieties Act vis-a-vis the Constitution, which is very protective of farmer rights, indigenous seeds, indigenous knowledge, the clauses in the law that were infringing on farmers' rights were removed, and that was a big win for us. We have seen indications that KEFI is appealing that case, but the issue of farmer-managed seed systems, even in the production of food, practicing agroecology is very important because as Marie practices agroecology in her farm, she needs to have access to seeds that are not genetically engineered, seeds that if she's wanting organic seeds. And so it's important that the rights of farmers are taken care of on issues related to seeds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne Maina, for responding to that question very exhaustively. I would like to come back to Mary. And there was this question about the statement that Kevin gave that our systems reward short-term gains. Why is this?
First, I'm not sure I understand the statement. I hear it all the time. I'm asked, you're organic. Do you harvest? I'm like, I never understand the question. If I put 1 acre of sweet corn, I will harvest 1 acre of sweet corn. I will harvest it within the same 4 to 5 months that my conventional compatriot will harvest. So I'm not sure where the thinking comes from, the yield divide. If anything, what we have seen is, well, you'll get 1 maize, I'll get 2 to 3 per maize. We've found that the yield only increases. I'm having broccoli heads that are 1 kilo big. Now, maybe I'm not talking to farmers in the room, because if there were farmers, they would have cheered me on. I mean, we are yielding some really good quality, export grade, because that's what you want to hear, veg. It's good enough for Marie, it's good enough for anyone. I mean, agroecology has not only better yield, better taste. And for me, that surpasses any other argument. We're not only yielding more, we are providing better tasting, nutrient-dense food. I don't understand how people need more convincing than that.
And you know, this takes us to this question, and thanks so much, Mary, about the extension. Where is the gap when it comes to extension? I'm so sorry for that. Let me go back. I think I was carried away by Mary because Mary has been my teacher, actually, because she's a practitioner, and I always get swallowed by her way of work because it is working in Nanyuki where she is. They are doing large scale. They are doing this to scale. And it's a full testament that we can practice agroecology to scale and not on spot basis that it has been promoted before. And this takes us to that question whereby we have been asked about the role of extension. The county governments are not employing. I don't want to dilute the role of extension, but allow me to come in and answer this question from perspective of whereby we are seeing a lot of policies in this country. Now we have started a cycle of agroecology policies. We have our national masterpiece of agroecology policy, and now we have already 5 counties that are taking up agroecology. They have running policies. We started with Moranga, we have got Makueni, we have Nakuru, we have Bungoma. Have I left another county, Anne? West Pokot. Thank you so much. Now, we appreciate that there's a wave of change. But the question we need to ask ourselves, are we still using the masterpiece of 60s, 70s, 80s, founded on the principles of Rogers when it comes, our father of adoption, when I started learning about extension at the university, agriculture extension, and basing our theory on adoption of farmer-to-farmer extension, or extension officer to farmer in terms of transfer of knowledge. And we have realized that we need to go to scale and not just look at what we call the model of adoption. And there's a lot of now reconstruction in terms of our thinking, whereby we are looking at how can we use these policies and change them to practice at scale. And this has been the challenge. So what we are challenging as we have these policies that are going to promote agroecology is to change our way of thinking. And I like what Marie you've said. It is in our mind, whereby we always think that I can only produce by use of fertilizer. We are not disputing, because that's where we are. But it has to be a gradual transition and changing the health of our soils, so that the structure in terms of the organic matter can be increased, and Mary has put it very well, so that we are going to enhance our water retention capacity. And I like what Professor Nancy alluded it very well and presented very well. So I would like to push this issue before I overindulge in respond this question to Professor Nancy and also to Kevin, to help us to contextualize this thing from a perspective of, first of all, let's go to Nancy, extension on soil health, then go to Kevin later on aspect of policy to practice, because that's where we are, and extension comes in there between. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you for the very engaging conversation. I really am super excited with what Marie is saying, because it's from a practice point of view, and when she talked about scale, I would also maybe pose a question if she would divulge the scale. How many acres? 100 acres, 10 acres, how many acres? Would really be happy to hear that scale, because it's super exciting to see that this has been done. So having said that, in terms of extension, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, because even in fertilizer application, most of our farmers apply blindly. They don't know the state of their soils. So they will go, they go to an agrovet and ask for fertilizers, and they will be given and apply without information on what is the state of their soils. So, and I believe that as we start off on the journey of agroecology, it's always good to understand sometimes that the results that we get will also depend on the initial state of the soil, in terms of what was the original organic carbon, how much are you able to produce, how much biomass are you able to produce. And I want to agree with Marie that there's been a big concept in many of our discourses on soil and organic inputs, that we don't produce enough organic inputs to sustain agroecological approaches. And you know, the truth is that is not an accurate position, that you only need to be a practitioner to appreciate the amount of biomass that actually comes from farms. It's what we use that biomass for and how we incorporate it within the farming system. So I do agree that we do have a lot of organic input that can be used indeed to improve soil, the soil health. But it is important that this messaging is properly shared out in extension. We know that agriculture is devolved, and so now extension is domiciled within the counties. And that has been a challenge. The transition from the national government to the county government, we know with devolution, has been a challenge, and that hasn't stabilized as yet. But I believe that there is an opportunity to see how do we then have messaging that helps the farmer to see how do you utilize the organic resources that are available within the farm. How do we create equipment that helps the farmer to utilize this organic residue? Because again, in scale, I would like to understand how Marie does it in terms of mulching, in terms of incorporating the organic residues, because when you do it in scale, that becomes a challenge, because then you may need to think about machinery and equipment. But with your permission, Haron, allow me just to comment also on the issue of the African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. I was a participant in this summit, and I know that one of the key issues, of course, that were raised is the whole issue of the fact that Africa is not using enough fertilizers, and therefore we need to see how we increase the amount of fertilizers we are using. And of course, that seems like contrary to what we are discussing in today's forum, where we are looking at agroecological approaches and how we can scale these out. But I want us to also be objective and to be critical in asking ourselves. The presentation that Winnie made showed that we are importing a lot of food from our neighbors, from beyond, we are importing a lot of food from our neighboring countries, but also beyond, like in India, bringing in rice and other products. 80% of rice is imported, 90% of wheat is imported, and then other foodstuffs also, the eggs, milk. We are not just self-sufficient in food. And maybe the question we should be also asking ourselves, why are we not self-sufficient in food? And so the whole conversation of fertilizers and agroecology then comes in to see, how do we balance off? Because again, empirical evidence shows when you use inorganic fertilizer, that, and Kevin mentioned this, that you get immediate results. And over time, of course, we know that the yields begin to decrease. And that's why you have to have an integrated system. For small-scale farmers, without proper extension, knowledge, and information, like Marie said, then there's a big yield gap between those who do it organically and those who do it using conventional methods. On the short term, there's a big difference. And so it is important to have these statistics and data, so that as we embrace agroecology, then we are embracing it in a holistic manner. And we are looking at the bigger picture. And we can borrow from some nations like Brazil, who adopted agroecology linked up with land reform. Because with subdivision of highly potential lands, production of food will continue to decline and will continue to be food insecure. So then we must ask ourselves, if we are to embrace agroecology, how do we embrace agroecology? Or my conviction, integrated soil fertility management with land reform, so that in the long term, then we are truly able to address the issue of the gap. So the question of, should we not be using more fertilizer? That's an interesting question that we should ask ourselves if we are to bridge the food security gap, because that is also a matter that is very related to adopting agroecology at scale and ensuring that the soils are healthy, and ensuring globally, asking ourselves, which nation has adopted agroecological to scale for most of the agriculture, and how is the food security? And what can we learn as a nation as we transition? What can we learn? Cuba was forced to adopt agroecology. Why? Because they could not import fertilizers, because of the embargoes that they had, and because of the changes in Russia, they could not at all import fertilizers, so they had to adopt agroecology. But what is their yield? Their yield is much lower than their neighbors, say Costa Rica or other countries that are in their neighborhood. Their yields are much, much lower if you just use cereals as an example. So I think it is important to have that empirical evidence so that while we truly want to embrace this kind of technology, and we know truly that it builds soil health, empirical evidence shows that, then we need to also see how do we bridge the yield gap over time, and how can we combine it maybe with land reform so that subdivision of land stops. We secure productive land, and that certainly will help us going forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Prof, for that very analytical and holistic approach in terms of balancing agroecology and use of fertilizer. I'll give Mary the mic shortly to be able to explain to us how she's doing or practicing agroecology to scale, and in depth on the her experiences in line with what Professor Nancy Mungai has brought to our picture. And I do agree actually that based on the condition of the soil, it's not a one-night transition. And I truly agree, like we've seen countries that have been able to have a policy shift of abandoning fertilizer overnight, how detrimental it has been in their food production. So we are saying that it's a transition that goes beyond just demonizing fertilizer, but creating a withdrawal system-based approach that based on enhancing the soil health vis-a-vis improving the biodiversity of the farm of our farms, both above ground and below ground, and thereby enhancing the element of the soil health and the system sustainability to be able to carry the crop that it's being subject to. I think this can be worked from different angles, both social, economic, biological, and also mechanical within a farming system. But before I come to you, Mary, allow me to go back to Kevin kindly. And I know, Kevin, you have got a very wide perspective of Africa based on the studies that I came to realize you have done, especially the landscape agroecology paper that you did that was able to review a wide range of countries, trying to look at the agroecology policies that are being adopted in these countries and trying to get the nuance that we can be able to borrow as a country. Kindly, this is going to inform us on the policy angle we are taking, the extension approaches that we can adopt, and how these can be able to help us to scale agroecology. Welcome, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Arun. Just to build up on what Prof has mentioned, I think what we normally see, we have very good policies. Of course, there are very good policies that are designed, but implementation is a problem, the implementation on the ground. So there's a disconnect between the policy design and the implementation. And at policy level, governments and institutions, sometimes they have very strong frameworks on agroecology. We've seen, like in Kenya, of course, about 5 counties already have got agroecology policies to promote agroecology within at county levels. The climate smart agriculture, food system transformation, among others. So these policies are they're often well written, evidence based, of course. From what Prof has mentioned, of course, we understand the empirical evidence. I'm happy that she's able to mention that Cuba was forced to adopt agroecology, but when you look at the yield, still a little bit low, but of course, at scale, they already adopted agroecology. So the challenge here begins where can we be able to translate these policies into practical action that farmers can actually use? And that is where now the extension officers come in. For example, maybe if we talk about a policy that should promote sustainable soil management, then what does this mean? This means that we need to train farmers on composting. We need to show them how to intercrop maize with legumes. Probably we need to provide demonstration plots in the village, link them to maybe some local input and seed system providers. So this means that it is a movement from policy to program to extension to farm level adoption. And I'm happy that some of the organizations like Alliance Diversity and SEAT already in one of the projects, they had agroecology living labs where they were trying to collaboratively show the real life innovations in where farmers, researchers, and even stakeholders come together to co-design and even test some of these agroecological practices real life. So that aspect of co-creation, not just at high level policy level that we researchers, we do the research, then we are not able to actually practically translate this into policy action. And so the weakness comes at the policy stage. Like we are trying to promote agroecology. We have a workshop probably in Nairobi or maybe in Naivasha. We do good reports, but then the farmer in Kitui or maybe the farmer in Kisumu, they never receive that particular message. So that is why the implementation fails. Particularly even at this particular point where now we are talking about this all global crisis. Does it mean that this particular conversation is going to end here? How do we ensure that farmers on the ground are able to even receive some of these messages that we are trying to share? So then we need a stronger last mile delivery system. Of course, the government comes in terms of the national policies. They develop the frameworks, the budgets, and then where the different government systems, of course, like in Kenya, we have the devolved system. The counties come in, they're able to translate. They come in and then they're able to translate it into their local extension programs and even crop-specific plans. We understand that different counties have got the CIDPs, the Country Integrated Development Plans, and they have different value chain crops that they're trying to promote. And so having uniform policies cannot be able to work. So if they're able to translate it to the local extension programs and even crop specific plans, then this can be able to assist. Then lastly, and then we need to also bring in the farmers so that the farmers can be able to provide feedback. Is it working or is it not working? And so that aspect of co-creating with farmers' lived experiences can be able to assist us in terms of bridging this particular gap. So I think in a nutshell, what I'm just trying to say that policy without implementation, it's just paperwork. And so practice needs to be in place so that the policy becomes sustainable. We need both. We need both implementation, but we also need to have the practice itself. Back to you, Arun.
Phones or their computers that they are dropping out. So please come in, Marie.
Hello. I just want to say that poorly managed agroecological farming will not give you yield. The same way poorly managed conventional farming will not give you yield. The comparison is the same. Agroecological farming is not manure. And I find that's what most people are displaying. It's not putting manure in the ground and putting seed and expecting to have yield comparable to your conventional person. And as Nancy says, let me lodge it into empirical data. I had an export contract for French beans a few years back. We grew agroecologically. Per acre, the target was 5 tons. The least we ever harvested was 4.5 tons per acre. That was better than my conventional compatriots. When I say that agroecological farming done right does yield, I'm speaking from experience and with authority. How do we do it at scale? Now, this depends. Necessity is the mother of invention. If you come to my farm, I have a little tractor with, what do you call I forget what's the name. My husband built this little contraption that every time we harvest, everything is gathered, and we have one location that it is all directed to on the day of harvest. So it's generally never more than a ton, which makes it easier for 2 people to do the job and take it there. On a farm I work in, which is 650 acres, that model is exactly the same.
Repeat,
650 acres is one of the farms that I represent on a weekly basis. We are transitioning from conventional to agroecological practices. And so far, so good. We have not had any yield reduction. All we are seeing is less pests, less diseases, more resilience, more stems. This particular one is flowers. The same is the case of herbs. I'm in the field. I'm in the industry. I'm speaking from experience. We are doing it. We're doing it well. We spend a lot of time learning how to do it well. Yeah. And how do we do it? So I told you we create teams. So I have 2 people who are manufacturing. All the bio-waste goes into a machine. It's chopped up. Those machines exist on all large-scale farms. On my little farm, we chop up with a panga in the demo farm. But in large-scale farms, they're shredders. 2 people do that work. 2 people have a target of translating 5 tons of biomass a day into compost piles. That's not a lot of labor if you think about it. And they'll produce 5 tons per day. And this is waste that we were throwing otherwise. I have another 2 people who are in charge of translating 8,000 liters of liquid fertilizer from this waste a week. Only 2 people producing this much. I have another 2 people who are involved in the actual, overseeing the use on the fields and coordinating with the teams. So 6 people are translating almost 300 acres and making it a very well-managed agroecological system. Let me not understate how much planning that requires, but the skill set is available. The mind is what we must change. Well said.
Well said, Mary. It's about the mind. It's about the mind. Any input from the online team?
Yes, we have 2 questions.
Yes.
They're both to Mary again. So, Mary? So we have 2 questions from Lydia and Nekesa. Lydia is asking, Marie, what is your take on how mainstream media is advertising the different synthetic fertilizer in this planting season? Nekesa is asking your perspective on the framing of cash crops as your perspective on framing of cash crops as food crops. For example, coffee, making farmers to do away with the actual food crop. Yeah, and maybe the questions for media, maybe also we could get to Winnie's perspective on the same. So, thank you.
I live in the village. I don't see a lot of advertisement, or maybe they're not bold enough to approach me. I can't tell you that I interact with a lot of advertising, or maybe I am just not interested, so I don't see it. That's my comment on that. Somebody else it's not my comfort zone. I don't actually know what you're consuming. I live in a bubble. On cash crops, this is hard. As a farmer, you have to make a livelihood, and you want to make it this way is what you know will sell. Cash crops tend to be the easiest way you're assured of a sale. So most people will tend to put coffee in. First of all, it's easy. It's easier. I mean, you're not tilling to the land every day. You're not taking care of the crop. This is my new take on this. First of all, biodiversity wins any day. If you're going to choose one cash crop, you're going to have a hard time, whether or not you're farming agroecologically. It's difficult to farm just one crop. So biodiversity is the king. But if that's your only option, because we are talking about livelihood here, have a garden, a kitchen garden for your sustenance that has at least 15 to 20 food crops that you as a family consume. Lastly, just because it's coffee doesn't mean you need synthetic fertilizer. I am currently working with a farmer who is an organic coffee farmer, 20 acres. Just because it's coffee doesn't mean you have to put synthetic fertilizer or pesticides. It can be done.
Any input from the media? Fiber? To respond to that question?
The media wants interviews later. So after we close, the media will come in.
Okay. Colleagues, this brings us to the end of this meeting, and I really would like to appreciate the kind of conversation we have had with you, and do observe that our takeaway home is that we will not transit from dependency on fertilizer to other organic-based system or integrated farming systems that incorporate agroecology overnight. We need to look at where our soils are, whereby they cannot support farming without fertilizer because they have already been impoverished. Some of these soils are acidic, as we have heard from the team, and they need to be reworked on. So it's not a one-off recommendation, but we do appreciate that, like what Mary has told us, it has to be a process of regaining the health of the soil, and that's why we are coming with agroecology. So as we practice agroecology, let's not hope that it will be a one-off kind of transition to high yields, and that will be a poor judgment of an agroecological system, because we are trying to heal a system that has been dead. Some of our soils are dead, and we know that, like what Professor Nancy said, that we should have living soils. So thank you so much, our panelists. We do really appreciate your input. Thank you so much, participants, both who attended here in-house and those who are online. We look forward to continue engaging with you. And please, if we have your contacts, we are going to share the emails of our presenters and our panelists so that you can continue engaging with them and enhance your knowledge base on sustainable farming practice as a transition to reducing dependency on synthetic fertilizers. Thank you so much. Christine, who is our host, let me mention here to the people on the floor is that Christine is our host. She's the coordinator of the Route to Food initiative, and food literacy forums are coordinated by the Route to Food initiative, which is a program of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and working with our civil society in the space of agroecology and consumers of safe food. Thank you. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, everybody. I won't keep you. We have refreshments, I think on the ground floor, but please register with Hadija before you leave so that you also get a meal voucher. Then I just wanted to thank you. I hope you've learned so much, and please follow our social media pages at Route to Food so that you get to know when we are hosting the next food literacy forum, and you join us. So thank you very much. Please